And we are live with today's pre-show. We are preparing for today's A+ Core 1 study group. Hello, everyone. Hello, chat room. Let's see how folks are doing in the chat. We got our stream ready to go. That looks good. We are recording. That looks good. We've got our map up. That looks good. Hope everybody's doing well. Folks already checking in on the map. I can see some pins, some virtual pins going into our digital pin cushion here. We've got all new questions for you today. Oh, we're back after a big holiday. We celebrated the 4th of July over the weekend, and here we are. Hello, chat. We're in good shape, though. We have managed to get all of the new questions in place. In fact, that's what I did this weekend, was putting everything together. Did it before the weekend, because I knew how that was going to go. And it was a lovely weekend. It was a lovely holiday. Everything, but now we're back here. Now we're back doing this. Hello, everyone. Not that it's that bad. That made it sound awful. Wasn't that bad. We are just simply stepping through all of this A+ content. There's so much going on this side. We've got tons of content we're creating and new things, and it's a very exciting time. I kind of like this summer because it gives us a chance to do that. There's these time frames between exams where we can really get things done. And I'm really, really having a good time with that part of it. Thank you for joining us today. We will be starting our live stream in about 8 minutes. We will be getting all new questions for you. So all you have to do is go to the URL that's right behind me, right here on the screen, professormesser.com/QA. That will bring up our question and answer. You'll see this map on the screen initially. It's this one right here. And you can put your pin cushion. You can click on the map to show me where you are. It looks like everybody so far who's put their pins in are in the North America. Hey, we got somebody up in Canada. We got the Canadians checking in. Thanks for being here. Some folks right there in Florida. 2 of us in Florida. Now that makes 3. So that because we are, of course, at our headquarters here in Central Florida. Hope everybody is doing well. We, of course, have our Tuesday live stream today, which is our A+ Core 1. And then for Thursday, come on back in 2 days, we got our A+ Core 2. So all the questions and everything we're doing today is Core 1 related. That is the 1201 exam. We got all the 1201 content in this live stream today. Now, of course, you can ask questions for me in the second hour. So if you have a question about a different exam, if you have a question about topics that aren't even necessarily covered on the Core 1 exam, that's fine. You can ask those by going to the same link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. There's a tab at the top. I don't think I put that on the live page this time, but we should do that for the next live page should have that. I will try to remember this. I will endeavor to lock that in and figure it out. Folks are checking in from all over. We got folks here from Cali. I think that probably is referring to California. In fact, more California, San Diego checking in. Got some folks in from Tejas. Thanks for being here. And of course, we've seen some other folks around the country and around the world. Folks checking in now from India. Got a link way down there, the bottom part of that. We got plenty to go through here. This is quite a bit of content today. I always create more content than we ever go through. So people always tell me, wait, you had this many questions queued up, but we only went through so many. Well, yes, because I always build just in case we need to go back and do another question, maybe something I don't like about a current question. I could throw them out in real time. Being a live stream, being a live event, you kind of have to plan for those things. If we were doing this as a recording, well, then I could stumble through this and have multiple takes, and it would be relatively easy. But it is not relatively easy. The live streams always throw something at you. Today, we're in pretty good shape. On our last live stream, the storms here in Florida, it is the summer in Florida. This is our July study group. And here in the Northern Hemisphere, it is summertime. And in Florida, we always get these afternoon thunderstorms. And they always tend to start up they start looking angry about this time. But by 2 o'clock when we're done, 2 hours goes by on this live stream pretty quick. And by the time we're done, it could be storming horribly outside. And in fact, that's what it was doing on our last live stream. But we made it through. No direct lightning strikes. That's what you always have to worry about in Florida, is when that happens. And after the last live event, I unplugged everything, disconnected it all. I've got this studio set up so that everything in the studio is on this desk. You can't see on the left and right. It's kind of hard to see. Are my racks. They are racks down here. They're dusty racks. They're racks I need to get in. It's about time to do the dusting, and on the right side as well. So I've got racks on the left and right, so I don't need a separate room for that. So everything I need to have available, everything that makes this work, either for recording new videos or doing live streams, is on this physical desk or in this physical desk. And that makes it easy when I need to unplug for a storm, because all I do is go to one power connection and it is isolated. I go to one network connection and the entire thing is isolated. I have a 10 gig link. You can't see it here, but there is a 10 gig switch. Maybe if I open the door. Can we open the door up real quick? You really can't see it there either. It's in the top. You can sort of see the switch part is up there with all the crazy cables. I need to do some cable straightening too. So I've got a 10 gig switch, or at least the uplink is actually the whole thing's 10 gig, because not only is the uplink 10 gig, but my direct connections from my equipment here that supports 10 gig is also doing 10 gig to that. So I've got a backup system. I've got my primary system. Everything is running 10 gig or more for that. Is that thing pulling more electricity than that outlet is made for? It is not. In fact, although this looks crazy up here, we are probably pulling, I did a calculation when we were starting to put the studio, we were revamping the studio. I did a full electrical profile of all of our equipment, what the max draw would be. Usually when you start something up, there's a big draw as it pulls in that first power. Although I believe I'm connected to a 20 amp circuit, because I did put 20 amp circuits in the studio, we could have got away with a 15 amp, because I'm really pulling about 7 or 8 amps. It's not bad at all. It's all LEDs. It's all, just basic equipment. There's nothing too huge or powerful. Maybe the video content and the video we don't do a lot of rendering though live on these. It's mostly just taking a very minor amount of compression. So that part's good too. So it's not really drawing a lot of power. It, obviously a huge concern coming from a data center background, coming from a computing background, and having worked in places where nobody paid attention to power. The people would just plug things in, and eventually a whole line of racks went down when the breaker popped. And that taught me, you should probably pay attention to power. It's an important thing to think about. So when we were building out this, I thought, okay, I've got this many monitors of this type. What's its wattage? What's it draw? Same thing for audio, same thing for video, same thing for laptop. We did the whole thing. So I think it was a good exercise anyway, because you do want to be careful about power and how it works. My biggest problem here is that this is a relatively new build, and some of the latest standards for electrical outlets, the electrical breakers, they look for any type of a power surge at all. If there is any type of spark, they will trip. You've probably seen this on a lot of the new breakers. So if I brought in a vacuum cleaner and plugged it in and turned it on, it would trip everything and the whole studio would go out, even though it wasn't a problem. I was just starting up a vacuum cleaner. So I ended up having the breakers swapped out for something that was probably not to code as I'm thinking about it. But every time I would breathe, every time I turned lights on in the room, the breaker would trip. And I don't know if you've ever done any live events, but when the breaker trips, it really affects the live event in ways that perhaps are not the best. So always pay attention to your electrical. Always make a list of everything you have. You should know exactly how much power you're drawing from an outlet. You should get monitoring tools if you don't that can tell you that. And look, at that single question, has taken us all the way up to noontime. Let's get a live stream started already. That's me. I'm just going to talk today, apparently. But now, let's get this going. Let's go to and get, no, I don't need a new slide. We can go back to our keynote, get a green light. There we go. Green light, green light, green light. This all looks good. Let's see if I can remember how to do this, everybody. Let's do a live stream. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the July 2026 Professor Messer 220-1201. That is our Core 1 A+ study group. These are the A+ study groups that we do every month. I do a Core 1 study group and a Core 2 study groups, where in this first hour, I will ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And in the second half of this live stream, it's a little less structured. I take questions from you, and I will answer your questions in our second hour. You can submit those questions for our second hour at any time by going to the same link that you're going to use to answer the questions in the first hour. That's super convenient, isn't it? It's the link that you see right here at the bottom, professormesser.com/QA. That is the link we will use. You will use that link to answer questions. You will use that link to ask questions. So a little bit of everything. Just to see if that link is working, let's try it out on something I like to call our rewind question. The rewind question is a question that is asking about something that we've talked about before. It's a question we had, in this case, from last month. This is the only time you're going to see a replay. So if you were here last month, maybe you remember this one. Let's try it out. The question is, a server administrator suspects that a network interface card is malfunctioning due to high error rate notifications. Which of the following should be used to test the interface of the Ethernet adapter? Is it A, tone generator, cable tester, network tap, inductive probe, or loopback plug? And as many of you recall, when you are answering these questions, we don't answer in the chat room. Please don't put any hints in the chat room. Instead, you go to the link that is on your screen that I have now properly shown to you. In the lower third, professormesser.com/QA. The question again, a server administrator suspects that a network interface card is malfunctioning due to high error rate notifications. Which of the following should be used to test the hardware interface of the Ethernet adapter? Should we use a tone generator, a cable tester, a network tap, an inductive probe, or a loopback plug? What a fine question, and we will find out the answer to that question in just a moment. I want to first thank you all for being here. We really could not do one of these study groups without you. I guess we could, but it would probably not be very good, because having you answer these questions is kind of the fun of going through all of this. Of course, when we're not doing a live stream, you can watch every minute of every video of our A+ course for free online on our YouTube channel. Go to professormesser.com/YouTube. And we also have a daily A+ pop quiz question that we put on X. We put it on Instagram. We put it on LinkedIn. And of course, when we're not here, we're always hanging out in our Discord along with thousands of others. Head on over to our Discord at professormesser.com/Discord. Sometime in this first hour, I'm going to ask you or give you information, rather, on how you could earn a 1-hour webinar category CEU. Now, if you don't know what that is, then this probably doesn't apply to you. For those of you that are already certified, you may be collecting CEUs to renew your certification. It's not the only way that you could renew, but a lot of people still do it. And listen in sometime during this first hour, and I will give you information on how you can renew, or at least get one more CEU that you can put towards your renewal. Also let you know that we will be talking today about the most recent, in fact, the only current A+ exams, which are the 220-1201 and the 220-1202. You'll also see these referenced as version 15 for some reason. I don't know either, but there it is. You'll see that reference always. So effectively, the 220-1201 is version 15, and the 220-1202 is also version 15. I don't know that they're going to change those versions at any time, but for some reason, we have both of those to contend with. These versions were released on March the 25th of 2025, which means that we estimate the retirement date for these exams to be somewhere around September of 2028. The exams themselves, you have to pass both of them to earn your A+. The exams themselves are 90 minutes for each of the exams. There's a different grading that you need to get, that you need to earn to be passing your exam. They are on a scale from 100 to 900 for both of these exams. It's kind of an odd scale, but there it is. For the 1201, you need to earn a 675 on that scale. You have to do a little bit better on the 1202. You have to earn a 700 on that same scale between 100 and 900. And as long as your score is that number or better, you've now passed that exam. Once you pass both of those exams, you are then A+ certified. And once you pass both of those exams, you are A+ certified for 3 years. So once you pass the exams, it really doesn't matter when release dates or retirement dates of the exams take place. You've already passed your exam. So you're just locked in for 3 years finally after passing. One less thing to have to worry about, right? Also let you know that about a day after we're done, you'll notice in the YouTube video description that there is a big list of annotations added with timestamps thanks to my marketing manager, Lori. Hi, Lori. She's watching this video on the replay and going through and putting in all of that timestamp information so that you can find exactly what you're looking for simply by clicking on those timestamps in our YouTube video description. This is something you like. Give Lori a heart in the chat. Let her know that is something you can appreciate. That is something we have years of these going back to help you find exactly what you need to help with your studies. As I mentioned, we also have our Discord that you could join. Our Discord has thousands of people on it that are studying for their A+, their Network+, their Security+, and other certifications. Come on over to the Discord. We got lots of things that we talk about in the Discord all the time. So feel free to stop in, just say hi. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/Discord. Eventually, you will need to take your exam, and the exam does cost a fee to be able to sit and take the exam, but you don't have to pay full price that you would normally pay over on the CompTIA website. What if the exact same vouchers were available for less money? Wouldn't you prefer purchasing one of those? Well, of course you would. So if you are in the US or Canada, I have discounted CompTIA vouchers on the Professor Messer website. We have been a platinum partner of CompTIA for years, and this is something that we can use to pass along a little bit of savings to you when you're planning to take your exams. Not only do you get the exam voucher for a discount, you also get a copy of our Exam Hacks ebook. This is an ebook that I wrote where I took all of the tips and tricks that I've accumulated through the years when taking these CompTIA exams, and I put them into one single tip document where you can find out more about what things should you do when you're studying. What are some tips you can use during the exam itself that might get you some extra points? All of this is documented in my Exam Hacks ebook, an ebook, by the way, that you cannot purchase directly. You only get this book included with a voucher purchase or with any of our success bundles. Find out more about that at ProfessorMesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to the question I asked you earlier, which was, a server administrator suspects that a network interface card, or NIC, is malfunctioning due to high error rate notifications. Which of the following should be used to test the hardware interface of the Ethernet adapter? Should we use a tone generator, a cable tester, a network tap, an inductive probe, or a loopback plug? What did you answer? Let's find out. We'll close our poll. I'm happy to say that we did so much better this time than we did last month because 59% of you say you use a loopback plug for that. 25% of you said you use a network tap. 12% say cable tester, and then a tie for 2% apiece between tone generator and inductive probe, which I guess makes sense since those things kind of go together from that perspective. We at least have that going for us. So those are the ones that we would be using. If you're ever in a situation where you're trying to determine how do you test an interface, a physical port on a device, that's what we do with loopback plugs. That's exactly the way those work. This is something that we can use to effectively take all the data that's going out of an interface and send it back into the same interface. Thus the name loopback. It's going out and looping right back into the same piece of equipment. Well, what good is that? We're not even sending the traffic across the network. We're simply sending it out an interface and then back into the interface. Well, yes, because that allows us to isolate that interface, which means that if we send out 10 ones, we would expect to see 10 ones come back into that interface. But if we're monitoring that, notice we got 9 ones and a 0, something is not quite right either with the sending or the receiving process. So it's a very simple way to check to see if we're really receiving what we should have sent. Obviously, that has to work first, because if that doesn't work, nothing else down the line is going to work properly. And that's why a loopback plug is perfect for this. This is not the same as a crossover cable. This is a different type of connection that is specifically taking all of the data going out and sending all of that data back. Loopback plugs is exactly what you would use for this. That is the answer that we were looking for, and that's the one that 59% of you chose as being the correct answer. Cable testers don't provide you with any information about the Ethernet adapter itself. A network tap allows you to break into a connection to capture traffic, commonly for network analysis tools, intrusion prevention, and other security devices. But a network tap also doesn't allow us to test the hardware interface of an Ethernet adapter. And then, as 2% of you knew, tone generators and inductive probes work together. We often call them a toner probe. They'll say, get the toner probe. We're really referring to a tone generator and an inductive probe, and those are used to locate one single cable in a huge grouping of cable. Those can be very valuable when you're in the data center, when you're in a wiring closet, and you just need to find that one cable. You need to get a good toner and a good probe to be able to do that. In this case, for testing the hardware interface of the Ethernet adapter, loopback plug was our answer, and 59% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done, and much better than our numbers from last month too. So I feel like we're doing a little bit better with those numbers when we do the replay. Maybe we've learned something. Maybe we haven't. Maybe it was just a guess. Either way, we'll take it. The correct answer is always something we want to say. Now let's shift gears a little bit, and I want to do a different kind of question. Some of you may realize, if you've taken one of these CompTIA exams before, that the very beginning of the exam is not a multiple choice question. The question we just did was multiple choice. There was a single question, and there were multiple answers to choose from. Even if you didn't know the answer, you had a 20% chance of getting this question right. Well, CompTIA doesn't want to give you that much of a guessing game. They don't want to make it quite so easy on you. So they're going to give you a different set of questions. There's a handful of questions you get at the very beginning of the exam that CompTIA calls performance-based questions. Performance-based questions, I guess simply, are anything that is not multiple choice. So you've got multiple choice, and in the big world of possible questions you could ask, every other question is a performance-based question. So it could be a matching question, it could be a drag and drop question, it could be a fill-in-the-blank question. They could put you to a command prompt and ask you to perform a function. Any way that you can think about getting a question put in front of you, that's what a performance-based question would be. Now, the good thing about performance-based questions is you don't have to study performance-based questions the same way that you don't have to study multiple choice questions. How the question is posed to you is not something worth studying. What the content of the question is, that information is absolutely worth studying, but that's what you're doing anyway. So the good part about performance-based questions is you've already studied the content. So let's see how well you might know some of that content, because I have for you a performance-based question of the month that is asking you a question about firewall rules. The question asks, a server administrator suspects that a network interface... Well, I got the wrong one up here. That's the last question. Let's do the real question that I have. Here it is. Boom. A technician is configuring firewall rules on a small office router after several services were moved to new servers. Users are reporting some services no longer work, and the technician must update the firewall policies to allow required traffic through the firewall. So our question is, I want you to determine the protocol, which you can see there's a column here for protocol and a column for port number. Now, the protocol I'm looking for is the application level protocol. I'm not looking for transport layer. I'm not looking for UDP or TCP. Quite honestly, UDP or TCP is something where that they don't even ask in the exam objectives, quite honestly. But this is one where I do want to know the application level protocol we're talking about. and I want to know the port numbers. And for this firewall policy descriptions, I have 6 different descriptions of these that I'd like you to tell me what are the applications used here and what are the port numbers that are used, and we need to update our firewall with that information. The first one is workstations automatically receive IP addresses from a central server. What protocol is this, and what port or ports is also used by that same protocol? The second one is users access the company intranet through a web browser. What protocol is that, and what port number is that? I guess technically that could be even more than one, but I think we all know it's really one, don't we? Let's see how you do with that one. The next one is a Windows technician uses graphical remote access to provide support. What protocol is that, and what port or ports is used by that particular firewall description? The next one is users access shared folders on a Windows file server. What port is being used for that one, and what port number? In this case, there could be more than one, but really, again, there's really one. So you have to tell me which one it really is. And if you know, then you know. If not, then you'll know shortly. We'll figure this out in a moment. Internal clients resolve host names to IP addresses. What protocol is used to have internal clients resolve host names to IP addresses, and what port numbers are used by that application? And then lastly, the mail server sends outgoing email to other mail servers. That is indeed the way it works. What protocol and port numbers are used for that one as well? So if you think you know the answers, go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and you can tell me what you think the right answer is for these. We got a couple of answers that have already come in. You don't have to type all of this in. And in fact, we won't be compiling these to show a summary, but you do need to remember what you put in there. I'm not sure if the latest version, we use Vevox as the app for this. I'm not sure if the latest version of Vevox tells you what the answer was that you chose while you're waiting on the answer. I think I should probably figure that out at some point, so I know. It used to be that you would not know. You put in all the answers and you'd hit submit, and then they would all disappear. And you'd think, well, what did I put for the first one? I don't remember. So you may want to make at least a mental note of, oh, I chose that for the first one, I chose that for the second one, etc., etc., etc. So at least we know what we're working with. We're working through these. A number of people getting their answers in, submitting them. And of course, if you'd like to submit your answers, you can do that at any time from the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. These performance-based questions, as you can see, are definitely not multiple choice. And in this one, I did make it probably a little bit harder than what you might get on an actual exam. I think on a real exam, because there's very little interactivity I can create with these questions. So this one's more of a fill in the blank because you're not given any prompts for this. You're not giving any options to put into this. But I think this could also be a pull down menu that might have a huge list of protocols you had to choose from that list. Or there might be a list off to the side that you have to choose from, or maybe the port numbers themselves are things you can drag and drop into a box. So really, this single question could be presented to you in a lot of different ways. So you've got at least a couple of things that you could go through. In our particular case, we're doing this as a fill in the blank, which does make it a little bit harder, probably, than what you would get on the exam. So if you know any of these, if you're able to fill in any of this information, you're doing much better than you would have to do during an actual exam, because at this point, I've seen no evidence or heard any reports that fill-in-the-blank questions are covered. Generally speaking, CompTIA doesn't like fill-in-the-blank questions. They want to give you a prompt. They want to give you a list of things to choose from, and usually they give you more than you can use. So there are 6 different options here. They might give you 12 protocols and 12 port numbers. Okay, they're not making it super easy, but at least they're making it a little more, less challenging. I can at least pick from a list and put it into a blank. Let's see how you did with this question. We'll see how well you know some of these fill in the blanks. We will start with a question that asks, a technician is configuring firewall rules on a small office router after several services were moved to new servers. Users are reporting some services no longer work, and the technician must update the firewall policies to allow required traffic through the firewall. And I'd like you to determine what the right protocol would be and what the right port number would be for these policies. Let's look at the first one on our list, which is workstations automatically receive IP addresses from a central server. So first we need to understand what protocol is being used to automatically assign these IP addresses, perhaps in a dynamic way. That's right. It is the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, or DHCP, that provides that functionality. And DHCP, as you're probably also aware, uses more than one port number. They use two different port numbers, port 67 and port 68. So you've got two to choose from in that list, and at least gives you an idea of what you need to have open on your firewall. So putting this into the firewall will allow those two port numbers to be able to pass through, and people will be able to dynamically receive a IP address when they connect to the network initially. We don't even think about DHCP until it's not working. DHCP works so well, but we still have to make sure that we have firewall rules in place to allow the traffic. Next on our list is this one that asks, users access the company intranet through a web browser. As I mentioned to you earlier, there was probably two different protocols that could be used for this, but as I told you, it's really one. And that's because the one that I chose was HTTPS. HTTPS is the one that is the Hypertext Transfer Protocol secure. Now, of course, it could be HTTP, but as we all know, you should not be using HTTP to do anything because none of that traffic is encrypted. We should be instead, that's why I say it could be more than one, could be two different protocols, but it's really one. That's because it's really HTTPS. What port number is associated with HTTPS? That's right, port 443. If this was HTTP, it would be port 80. I will accept either of those because technically both of those would be correct in this particular description of the protocol. But we all know it's really HTTPS, don't we? Yes, we do. Next one that we need to find an answer for is a Windows technician uses graphical remote access to provide support. This is another one where it could be more than one type of answer, although because it is Windows and because it is a graphical front end that we are using to do remote access with, it is more than likely this is RDP, the Remote Desktop Protocol. There are other protocols that you could use to be able to do this. VNC applications, for example, have remote access, graphical remote access capabilities, but because this is Windows, and because it's built into Windows, we would use the Remote Desktop Protocol, which of course uses port number 3389 by default. So if you're capturing traffic on a network and you see port 3389 in use, it's probably going to be Remote Desktop Protocol. The next firewall rule that we need to find a port number for is users access shared folders on a Windows file server. What protocol is used to access shared folders on a Windows file server? If you perform your packet capture, you'll see that is probably Server Message Block, SMB. Server Message Block is a very common protocol inside of Windows. It manages file transfers. It manages a lot of management functionality, manages sending print information to a print queue. That is what we would use, is SMB. You might also see SMB referred to as CIFS. I think everybody running Windows, though, pretty much calls it Server Message Block, so you'll probably only see that as SMB. And these days, SMB, when it is directly communicating between two devices, is using port number 445. That's what most Windows systems will use these days. If for some reason you're stuck looking at a Windows environment from 15 or 20 years ago, there are some other options there for port numbers, but for the most part, everything we're doing on our modern networks with SMB will be directly between two IP addresses over port number 445. And the next on our list, we're getting close to the end, we have internal clients resolve host names to IP addresses. What protocol resolves host names to IP addresses? This might have been a gimme. That's right, it's DNS, the Domain Name System. Domain Name System allows us to perform a resolution between a name and an IP address, or the reverse of that, along with a number of other functions that we built into these DNS servers over time. DNS itself operates using port number 53. And then the last one on our list is that the mail server sends outgoing email to other mail servers, which is a relatively simplistic way to describe the process, but that is pretty much how it works. Mail server sending messages down the line to another mail server is how we're able to send all of these email messages back and forth, to and fro, all over the internet. The protocol that we would use for doing something like that would be the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, or SMTP. SMTP is used directly by these devices to send mail from one device to another. And if you are sending traffic over the network using SMTP, then you're probably using port 25. Although I would argue these days you're probably using a secure port. Although what I've seen on a number of networks, they've just made port 25 their secure port. There, you've just solved the problem for most of these email clients. So those are the firewall rules that we needed. If we need workstations to automatically receive IP addresses from a central server, they need to run DHCP over ports 67 and 68. Users accessing the company intranet through a web browser, they wouldn't just use HTTP. I guess they could. They'd use HTTPS, which runs at port 443, not that horrible port 80 that you would find over there on the HTTP side. You've got a Windows technician using a graphical remote access to provide support is probably running the remote desktop protocol over port 3389. Users accessing shared folders on a Windows file server are using server message block over port 445. Internal clients resolving host names to IP addresses are using the domain name system, and that uses port 53. And then a mail server sending outgoing mail to another mail server, well, that's SMTP, the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, and that uses, by default, port 25. If you got all of these correct, you obviously got 100%. If you missed one, you got 0%. Well, that's not entirely true either, is it? One thing that CompTIA has told us on their frequently asked questions for performance-based questions, it's on their website, it is documented, is that in cases like this, they could potentially, if they wanted to, score this with partial credit. So at least you've got that to look forward to. Maybe if you missed one of them, you would get 5 out of 6. So hopefully they do things like that when it comes down to a question like this, where you could get some in the middle number. It's not just an all or nothing scenario. CompTIA said they could potentially score it that way. Now, the reality is they don't tell you how they score it. You will never know how they score it. And they may not decide to provide you with partial credit on that day. Well, that's just the way it goes. We don't have any way to know if they do or not. There's no way to reverse engineer it. My recommendation would be just do the best you can. And don't worry so much about how they score the systems, how they score these exams. Worry more about knowing the content, so ultimately the score isn't going to matter. You're just going to do so well that you'll pass the exam and you're off to the next thing. That is also our performance-based question of the month. Hopefully that's given you some ideas of things you need to know for your exam. Make sure you check those out. We have a whole set of port numbers that go well beyond this list in the official exam objectives. Make sure you have a look at those. Let's now go back to a multiple choice question, shall we? It feels better already, doesn't it? Here is the multiple choice question I would like to ask, which says, an office manager is comparing a 27-inch 4K monitor to a 65-inch 4K television in the lobby. If both displays have a horizontal resolution of 3,840 pixels, what determines the difference in their pixel density? Would that be the horizontal sync timing? If I could push the button, I would be able to show you that. And maybe I will not be able to show you that because now all of a sudden I can't show you that for some reason. That's always good, isn't it? If you're ever in the mood, if you're ever in the mode of looking at and going through, knowing where these things are going, this is my problem right now too. Let's get that back up and running. I probably turned it off at some point. I probably hit a button and then that did not work either. Let's have a look at the possible answers for this. The question again asks, an office manager is comparing a 27-inch 4K monitor to a 65-inch 4K television in the lobby. If both displays have a horizontal resolution of 3,840 pixels, what determines the difference in their pixel density? Is it horizontal sync timing, refresh rate settings, aspect ratio specifications, a color gamut coverage, or the physical display width? If you think you know the answer, Go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We will see how you do with this one. This is a new topic on the 1200 series. If you studied for a previous version of the A+ certification, you probably didn't see this topic listed. So something new that you need to know. Another thing I often find with these questions too is I try to put into the answers things you should also know. So all of the answers that are in here are topics that are pulled directly from the exam objectives. So make sure that even if you know the answer, even if you locked in on what you thought the answer was, make sure you look at all the other answers here and that you know what those are. If one of these looks difficult to understand, you don't exactly know what it is, you sort of know what it is, you might want to make a note of that. Jot that one down so you can go back and study that particular topic. That might help you, at least for your studies, because they may not ask you about pixel density. They might be asking you about refresh rates. They might be asking you about sync timing or ratio expectations or gamut coverage or display width. You need to know what those differences are between all of those. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, an office manager is comparing a 27-inch 4K monitor to a 65-inch 4K television in the lobby. If both displays have a horizontal resolution of 3,840 pixels, what determines the difference in their pixel density? Is it horizontal sync timing, refresh rate settings, aspect ratio specifications, color gamut coverage, or physical display width? Let's see what you answered. We'll close our poll, and we're a little torn as to what these are. 43% of you say it is the aspect ratio specification, whereas 38% of you say the answer is physical display width, and then it drops way off down to single digits at that point. 9% for color gamut coverage, 9% for refresh rate settings. And then it goes all the way down to 1%, at least one person said, it's the horizontal sync timing. That is what would determine the pixel density. Let's talk about pixel density, shall we? If we want to compare and contrast what pixel density is, if you want to do the math, you take the number of pixels and you divide that by the number of inches. I guess if you're in a different country, it would be a different set of standards, but it's the same formula. Maybe instead of number of inches, you do it by number of centimeters. So that would give you the pixels per inch. That's what a pixel density is referring to. In 1 inch of a physical, I need to get my 1 inch ruler out. We got a ruler, and in an inch on your monitor, how many pixels are in that 1 inch? Now, obviously, this has a number of different things that would change those numbers. If you change the number of pixels, that would certainly change the answer. And if you change the number of inches of the monitor itself, that would change the answer as well. You can see the difference in pixels. If it's 10 pixels per inch or 20 pixels per inch, you can see those are two different pixel densities. It's much more dense on the 20 pixels per inch. And notice the circle's a little more round because we have more pixels to work with. So if you have a 27-inch 4K display that is 3,840 horizontal pixels and 24 inches wide, and again, this is measuring it wide, whereas we generally think about the measurement of a monitor on the diagonal because that's how they are marketed and sized in the marketing. But when we are measuring for pixel density, we look at it as a pure horizontal number, and that will be 160 pixels per inch if I did my math right. If you have a 4K television, exactly the same resolution, exactly the same output functionality, exactly the same everything, except it's 65 inches long, which comes out to be about 57 inches wide. Same formula, but notice 67 pixels per inch. So as we were stretching out and making our monitor bigger, we weren't changing the resolution. Therefore, there were fewer pixels per inch on that much larger display. And you do the math, you look at the back end of this, you try to break down the physics of it. Yep, that measures out. That all works out. That is exactly what that pixel density would be. So our formula, number of pixels divided by number of inches. Now, in this case, we are looking at a 4K monitor and a 4K television. The number of pixels is exactly the same. The only thing that changed is the size of the monitor itself, 27-inch and a 65-inch, which means that the people that chose the physical display width of 38% of you chose that one. That is the number that we were looking for. That is the value that determines pixel density in that formula. That is not the plurality of answers we got, however. The number one answer, 43% of you chose, was aspect ratio specifications. The aspect ratio is a number that tells you what the screen information is set to when you compare the horizontal with the vertical. So, for example, the older style sort of square monitors that we used to have were 4:3. When we look at today's monitors, which are sort of that widescreen monitor, we look at those as a 16:9 aspect ratio. So those aspect ratios, though, describe the information we're viewing on the screen. It doesn't change the actual size of the monitor when we change that. Do you imagine? I need a 4:3 monitor, and the sides sort of shrink in. Nope, doesn't happen that way. So the number of pixels never changes. Now, what you choose to put in those pixels, that's a little different. And that's why aspect ratio specifications would not be the answer that we were looking for. Pixel density is not determined by refresh rate. We didn't even see that anywhere in the formula. It is also not changed. The refresh rate, by the way, describes how much the information on the screen is changing over a certain amount of time. If you have something that is very high, fast, and high moving type video, for example, you will need a higher refresh rate to keep up with all of those changes that are occurring on the screen. Those don't change your pixel density. The color gamut refers to how well those colors are represented on the monitor itself. Less expensive monitors perhaps don't show the right colors of red or the blackest blacks. But if you get higher end monitors, you'll find that they are meeting a standardized set of a color gamut, so that if you're doing something that does require an accurate color representation, maybe you're doing video editing, maybe you're creating marketing materials, and you want the colors on your screen to match the colors that people will see printed on a page, for example, then you'll want to get a monitor that matches these color gamut standards to as close as possible, if not directly at 100%. So color gamut has nothing to do with pixel density, and horizontal sync timing is referring to the way the information is also shown on the screen. That also does not modify the number of pixels. Therefore, the only answer that we have is the one right here at the bottom, the physical display width, and 38% of you got that one absolutely right. Well, there's a lot that you have to know. Just because maybe we didn't know anything about pixel density doesn't mean that we didn't know about these other topics, but we may want to go back and look at more about pixel density. And we can do that by going back to all of our videos. Now, of course, our A+ video course has in it 137 videos. It's over 19 hours of content just to get through all of our Core 1 course and all of our Core 2 course. Now, of course, I recommend that you watch every single one of these videos, but not everybody has the time, and maybe it's a topic you already know about. Maybe we skip over a couple of them. Wouldn't it be nice if we had some way to at least reference that information? And what I've done is take every bit of text, all of the important graphics, all of the tables, and anything else that is important from these videos, and I put them into a set of course notes. My course notes are designed to give you that information that maybe you would normally miss if you didn't take those notes or you didn't watch that video. So the course notes themselves, I have here, this is the PDF digital version of these. We call it our digital edition. We also have these course notes available in a physical form as well. So whether you need it in a printed book form or whether you need it in the digital form, you can get it in both. And you can see we have all the text, we have all the important images, we have tables, we have other details. We tried to put as much as possible into these notes in a way that allows it to be a nice quick reference guide, but it's also something that you can use as a study reference as you are going through the videos, after you watch the videos, just another way to help give you the information you need when you're working through the study process. This is a great quick reference guide to use as you're sitting in the room just before taking your exam. Maybe you go through and read up on all of the details that maybe you need refreshing on just before walking into the room. Also, if you get the physical edition, you get access to the digital edition for no additional charge. So while you're waiting on this to be shipped to you, because we print each one of these individually just for you on demand, while you're waiting on that delivery, you'll be able to download and start referencing this on your screen with the PDF right away. You can find out more about that. Use the link on your screen, professormesser.com/1201 notes. Let's do another question, shall we? Of course we shall. I have plenty more questions for you. The next question on our list, a Mac OS question. That's what we needed. Shifting gears a bit to the Mac side, the question asks, a company uses Mac OS for all workstations, but an internal billing application requires Windows 11. Ugh. One single app. That's how it always works, isn't it? Which of the following would be the best way to use this app without using separate physical computers? Would we perform a clean install of Windows 11? Would we use host-based virtualization? Would we enable screen sharing in Mac OS? Would we upgrade the app to use Mac OS? Or would we run the Windows 11 app in compatibility mode? It's got to be one of those. If you think you know the answer, as always, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You want to go to the link on your screen, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. A lot of Mac people out there. I've been running Windows, Mac, and Linux for a long time now. We use all of those here at Messer Studios. The screen you're looking at right now is a Mac OS screen, but the other screens that we use for a lot of these other questions, especially when we're working on these courses, are running Windows. And if you're on the Professor Messer website right now, you're on a flavor of Linux. There's always a little bit different. There's always something that we're using here that's a little off the mark. And of course, we're using Android, we're using iOS. There's an operating system. We try to use it here. We don't particularly latch on to one or a single set of operating systems because different operating systems do different things in different ways and excel in different ways as well. A lot of people got their answers in, so let's see how you did. The question asks, a company uses Mac OS for all workstations, but an internal billing application ironically uses Windows 11. Which of the following would be the best way to use this app without using separate physical computers? Would it be perform a clean install of Windows 11, use host-based virtualization, enable screen sharing in Mac OS, upgrade the app to use Mac OS, or run the Windows 11 app in compatibility mode? Let's see how you did with this one. We will close our poll and look at the results. Got a strong answer on this one. 85% of you say the answer is use host-based virtualization. I have a different answer. My answer is wrong, though, but let's step through it. I would say the 85% of you, just to cut to the chase here, you're absolutely right. The 85% of you that said use host-based virtualization would be the best way to use this app without using separate physical computers. This is what I do on my Mac when I have a Windows app that I need to run. I bring up my list of applications, I click run, and Windows starts up, and it's running on my Mac OS desktop. That's exactly what these folks would use as well. 85% was a strong number. Well done on that one. There were a few answers we did not get, but legacy software can be a bit of a challenge. Virtual machines have changed everything for us. We used to have older systems. Before there was host-based virtualization, you would have to have two separate physical computers on someone's desk. And I worked with a number of organizations, and that's how they managed it, especially for their developers that need to run one operating system to develop and a different operating system to see how it runs. They would have two physical computers on their desk. And they would have to manage both of those, the power for both of those, the two monitors for both of those. Not exactly the easiest configuration. Virtualization allows us to do so much more these days. That's what these folks should have used for this, and that is the answer that most of you chose. 12% of you said run the Windows 11 app in compatibility mode. And it sounds like that should work, right? Except compatibility mode is a feature inside of Windows. And we're not running Windows, we're running Mac OS. Mac OS doesn't have compatibility mode. And it's sort of a trick question, but not really. You should have known about compatibility mode being a Windows feature and knowing that you wouldn't run it in Windows we have to be running Windows to run compatibility mode because that's a Windows mode. We don't have Windows. We have Mac OS. So not an answer that we were looking for. We're getting close though. We were almost there to make that other leap into virtualization from there. 1% of you said enable screen sharing in Mac OS. What are you going to share? There's no Windows anywhere to share. So that's why only 1% of you chose that one. I liked this answer, quite honestly. 1% of you said upgrade the app to use Mac OS. I'm going to change the right answer to that one person who said upgrade the app to use Mac OS. I think that's the right answer, except that wasn't the question. The question was, which of the following would be the best way to use this app without using separate physical computers? Well, upgrading to use Mac OS, it's not the same app at that point, is it? It's a different binary completely. Although that would be nice in this scenario, not the answer we need. And that's why only 1% of you chose that one. And then 0% of you said an answer that works. Technically, this is a valid answer. Perform a clean install of Windows 11. Just nuke those Mac OS systems, install Windows 11 on those. Not something you can easily do. And in fact, none of you thought that would be the best way to use this app. 0% of you chose perform a clean install, and 0% of you got that one right. So that was very good of you not to choose that answer. 85% of you did pretty well though. Use host-based virtualization. Of course, that's what you do. That works perfectly fine. Would allow you to keep running the same physical device. Simply load up some virtualization software and a copy of Windows, and you're up and running and can use, for some reason, an internal billing app that was written for a company that uses all Mac OS, but the app was written in Windows. I know the question didn't make sense. When you started piecing it together, when you logically started putting it together, that is a little bit more of a challenge. So that is what that comes from. People are asking in the chat room, where's this practice test from? I just wrote it for this. I wrote it for you today, right now. These questions, prior to me writing them, did not exist, and they will not be put into anything else when we're done. This is the only time you'll see it. They're not from a direct practice test. They are something I did just for you, just today. Let's do another one just for you and just today. Next question on our list asks, a support ticket indicates a user can access files on the local server, but cannot reach any websites on the internet. Which of the following should the technician ping to confirm internet connectivity? Would they ping subnet mask, the DNS server, the loopback address, the default gateway, or the DHCP server? Got a few options to choose from. A support ticket indicates a user can access files on the local server, but cannot reach any websites on the internet. Which of the following should the technician ping to confirm internet connectivity? Is it subnet mask, DNS server, loopback address, default gateway, or DHCP server? Do you think you know the answer? Go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You want to, of course, work through the details of troubleshooting this kind of network problem. This is very common on the exam to have a scenario, and then they give you, what do you do first? What do you click on? What is the thing that you need? What is the thing that you're going to reference? So they want you to really work through the problem. In fact, the question could have been, what do you use to confirm internet connectivity? Use ping. Okay, well, what do you ping? Oh, that's a different question. I have to know a little bit more to be able to answer this question. And that's really what this question is about, is getting you to know a little bit more about this problem. And if you don't know, that's perfectly reasonable. We're about to find out, and then you'll know forever. So let's find out what you chose. The question asked, a support ticket indicates a user can access files on the local server, but cannot reach any websites on the internet. Which of the following should the technician ping to confirm internet connectivity? It's a very specific question. Is it a subnet mask, a DNS server, a loopback address, a default gateway, or a DHCP server that we should ping? What do you think the answer is? Let's find out. We'll close our poll. We got a rainbow. We got close to a majority, but not quite. 47% of you say the answer is default gateway. 35% of you say the answer is DNS server. 15% of you say the answer is DHCP server. 2% said loopback address. Again, with the 0%. No, I'm putting answers in here that are worthless because nobody's answering them. Subnet mask, nobody said you should ping the subnet mask. It is ludicrous, isn't it? Of course you're not going to ping the subnet mask. The subnet mask is a mask and not a thing. You will, if you get a response from pinging the subnet mask, there's other problems you're going to have to work through. So the 0% of you that answered subnet mask were correct, which means all of you are correct as it relates to subnet mask. So you got that going for you. Let's kind of break this down, though, and how you would troubleshoot problems, especially connectivity problems, which is what this is. We can talk on our local network, but we can't talk to anything on the internet. Do we even have internet connectivity? How would we even know how to ping that? Where would we go to begin the process of that? Well, we can step through some very simple network troubleshooting processes. So the first one that we need to confirm, if we're not able to talk to anything, maybe we're not even connected. Maybe there's just no signal going over the wire at all. One of the best things they put on Ethernet adapters, really on adapters in general, is they put those little lights on the back of the adapter. Thankfully, they put these lights on the back of the adapter because we can see whether it is communicating, whether it has a signal, what we call a link light. We have a link now between that device and the switch that's plugged into from that perspective. So that's the first step. Do we have a link light? If we do, then we're at least able to see the switch on the other side. There's some type of physical connection between the two. So we'll have to figure that out as well. Next on our list, the good place to go is what would be the next thing that we could troubleshoot. Since we know we're connected on the network can see that we're here. Am I even sending things out on the network? One way to do this is to ping a loopback address. A loopback address is the address of your device. You may be thinking, wait, I know I'm a device. I know I'm here. I don't need to ping myself. I'm sitting on the machine on my keyboard. I know that it's here, but the reality is we don't know if it's actually sending information over the network. And one way that we can do that is to ping an IP address that designates our local machine. In fact, every local machine has the same IP address, and that is 127.0.0.1. We refer to this as our loopback address. This is built into IPv4, which means that every device has a loopback address. Technically, it's 127.0.0.0/24. I think it's /24, right? Or is it /8? I have to remember which one of those it is. In any case, the one we tend to use, though, is the first address. And I will tell you, I have seen some implementations of loopback addresses that did not include any other IP addresses, which technically speaking is out of specification, but it did ping 127.0.0.1. So I think that's always a good way to go. Maybe go to 127.0.0.1. I think it's a /8 too. You should be able to do 127.255.255.254, I would think, and be able to make that work. Does that mean I'm going to have to go to my computer right now and ping that? Ping 127.255.255.254 didn't work. So maybe it's not /8. This is one of those where there's a lot of nuance, a lot of details you always have to know to be able to do this. But if I did ping 127.0.0.1, I know you're not seeing this. I'm doing it in another window over here, but that is working. What about .2? Not working either. There's a good example. And I don't know whether that's something I built into my security software or whether it's something built into this operating system. Who knows? Find out the details. And I think there's probably a story there. We'll have to figure out the story there as we work through it. Once we configure and confirm that our loopback address is pinging, and mine indeed is, I need to ping whatever local IP address might be on my local IP subnet. So if I knew that my address was 10.1.1.1, maybe I know the one next to me is 10.1.1.2. Let's try to ping someone who's just next to us. They're on our local subnet. There's no routers involved. There's no other switches involved. There's no routing tables that we have to worry about. There's nothing other than our devices on a single switch able to communicate with each other. So pinging a local IP address helps us with that. This next step is an important one because now we want to see, can we communicate off of our local subnet? Can we communicate outside of this? And one of the ways that we could do that is to ping our default gateway. Default gateway is kind of the IP name of what's our local router. It's a local router. The local gateway, the default gateway is the local router that we use to be able to communicate off of our local network. So if you're able to ping that router, although we don't have any confirmation that the routing functionality of the router is working as we would expect, but generally they are, we could at least know that we're looking at the right IP address and going to the right one to be able to see if it's there. Now, if we ping what is configured as our default gateway and that device does not respond, it's very possible that device is not working, and that could be the reason that we are not able to communicate out to the internet. If that does work, how much farther can we get? Can we really communicate with the device that is out on the internet somewhere? Yeah, ping quad 1, 1.1.1.1, ping quad 8, 8.8.8.8, ping quad 9, 9.9.9.9. These are IP addresses that are services that are supported by large companies. Quad 1 is Cloudflare, quad 8 is Google, quad 9 is, I think it's quad 9, isn't it? Literally quad 9. But those are services that are always there. So if you're able to ping 1.1.1.1 or you're able to ping 9.9.9.9 and you get a response. So on mine, if I ping 1.1.1.1 and I get a response back from that, then I'm communicating out my system through my IP stack, through the default gateway, through probably many other routers out to the internet somewhere in the world. And I'm getting a response back, in my case, in less than 10 milliseconds from wherever this device is in the world. I'm now able to get a response back from that. A miracle that any of this even works, quite honestly. And now we've just become so accustomed to it. It's remarkable what we're able to do. That is a very common set of troubleshooting steps. Sometimes we skip over some of these. Maybe we start at the other side. Maybe we're comfortable with the system. So the first thing we do is we ping quad 9. First thing we do is we ping quad 1. Are we getting there? Oh, we're not? Let's start backing up. Can we at least talk to our default gateway? Can we ping that? Yes or no? We can't ping that. Can we ping anything else that's on this network? Is it us? Is it something else? So you can see how you can work from different sides of this to be able to work your way back to wherever this problem is occurring. Which side you start on doesn't really matter. You will ultimately find where the problem is. The only difference will be how many of these do we have to go through until we find that. It's only 5 steps. Not enormous to be able to make that happen, but certainly gives us a perspective. And now that we know that process, then we know that the answer that we were looking for was to ping the default gateway. Now, what about these other answers we got? Which of the following should the technician ping to confirm internet connectivity? 47% said default gateway, and default gateway is the only answer here that would allow us to confirm internet connectivity, given the other 4 answers that are always here. The 35% of you, almost a tie, effectively a tie for first, was DNS server. Now, it could be that we are not able to perform a DNS resolution, and that's what's causing our problem, but that wasn't the question. The question said, which of the following should the technician ping to confirm internet connectivity? The DNS process is an important step if you're trying to resolve an IP address from a DNS name or fully qualified domain name. But pinging a DNS server tells you nothing about internet connectivity. You don't even know if the internet's up or not. All you know is that the DNS server is working. So that's why, in this case, DNS server would not be the answer that we would be looking for. Obviously, the DNS server plays an important part in the process of us being able to resolve an IP address from a fully qualified domain name, but it has nothing to do with actual internet connectivity. We have 15% of you said you would ping the DHCP server. And again, It could be that our DHCP server is down. We got an API-PA address, an automatic private IP address, API-PA, and that automatic private IP address only allows us to communicate on our local network. But again, that wasn't the question. We wanted to know, can we talk to the internet? And given the 5 answers here, the best answer would have been ping 1.1.1.1. Well, that wasn't on here, was it? This is something you'll very commonly see on the CompTIA exams, is that the obvious answer, the one that you have top of mind, the thing that you would do first, isn't in the list. And the question knows this and says, which of the following should you do first, or should you do next, or would be the best thing to do? So they leave out the most common answer, and they give you other things that you now have to decide from. And that's why DHCP server would not be the answer we're looking for, because it doesn't allow us to confirm any internet connectivity. It only confirms, is the DHCP server working or not? We have 2% that said loopback address. Loopback address would be able to determine if we're able to communicate to our local machine. We want to know, can we communicate to the internet? That would not be the case. And then lastly, subnet mask. Nobody chose that one. Subnet masks are not an IP address. You cannot ping them. They will not be able to provide you with any details. If I was to ping 255.255.255.0 on my computer, it gives a timeout. Not a valid IP address. It's not going to ping. It's not going to work properly. That would not be how this works. Generally, your DNS server and your DHCP server are local services. You generally don't host your DNS server and your DHCP server out on the internet for this very reason. Because if you lose your internet connectivity, you've now lost your DHCP server and you've lost your DNS server. That's why we have those servers local on our network. Might there be another one on the internet? There might be another alternative or redundant one out there, but it's nice to have them local just in case you run into any problems. In this case, the only answer that makes any sense for confirming internet connectivity would be to ping the default gateway, and 47% of you got that one absolutely correct. Being able to do network troubleshooting is an important thing. So make sure you're familiar with that last section of basically the last section of almost any CompTIA exam. The last or next to last is the entire troubleshooting domain. You'll often find that the troubleshooting builds on the things that were already mentioned earlier in the course. So you're kind of putting everything together during that troubleshooting process, during that part of the troubleshooting. So if you're somebody who's maybe isn't getting the first part when you go through the first time, the data, understanding about networking and understanding these commands, by the time you get to the troubleshooting section, you're probably going to be pretty familiar with it because it effectively goes through a lot of these things again. This is kind of the problem when you've gone through all your videos, you've gone through all of your book reading, you've done some labs, you've worked at the command line, but now you want to really see if you're ready for the exam. And I think that's a perfect place to start performing some practice tests, to go through some sample questions and sample answers, very similar to what we're doing today, and be able to see how well we do with these practice tests. Part of the problem, though, if you've ever looked at some practice tests that you might find out on the internet somewhere, a lot of this stuff on the internet is not very good. It's either outdated, going through topics that you'll never see on the exam anymore. They've dropped them years ago. Or the questions themselves are not written in a similar style or similar tone to the actual exam. So you're not really preparing yourself for the process. Maybe the content is right, but maybe the style is wrong. And sometimes, very often, the question and the answers are just wrong. The answer they're giving has nothing to do with what the question was asking, and that just makes it more complicated. Now you're not even sure if the information you've been given is correct, or is this sample question correct? This is the problem I found. So I thought one of the best things I could do would be to write my own practice exams book. These are practice exams specific to this version of the A+ certification exam. So everything that is listed in the 220.12.01 exam objectives is also in this particular book. We do not deviate from that list of objectives. So if you're taking a question from this book, you know that content is in scope for the exam because I go through every single question and make sure that every question and every answer is something that you recognize coming directly from the exam objectives. Let's maybe look at a question since we do have some time. I know we're at the top of the hour, but let's do another question, and we'll take this question directly from my practice exams book. So this is from the book. This is from page 11. See the page number down here. It's question A30. And the question asks, in which of the following would a lightning cable most likely be used? Would that be connect a server to a display monitor, increase the available memory of a device, remotely control a mobile device, or charge a mobile device? Got a few things we can do there. Now, one of the things that, of course, as a standing rule, please no answers in the chat room, please no hints in the chat room. But in fact, we don't really have this in our Vevox. I just sort of pulled this one up just so we could go through it. But when we're looking at this, this is a PDF. So this is our digital form of this, which means we can annotate it. So if there's certain things we're looking at and we're thinking about the terms that are in use, if we have a stylus, we can write on the screen. We can also connect to this on the screen. We could do other pieces on the screen with this. We can save this annotation because it's a PDF and it's not restricted in any way. So I could save that. Well, it doesn't allow me to save in this view because I've locked this one down. But if I wanted to save it, you would certainly be able to save this and have it available on your machine as well. And you can make this and take it with you wherever you happen to go. I've also put into this document a way to easily find the answers. So you'll notice a quick answers on page 31. I'm, of course, on page 11 as we sit here, but I want a detailed overview of this answer. It's on page 65. But instead of scrolling through this document to try to get to page 65, I've made a link where it says the details 65, and I click on that, and it takes me to page 65. Just clicks me over there. So we have our question at the top, and it says the answer is D, charge a mobile device. Now, that would be a good one to think about from a Lightning perspective. Lightning is that older style connector from Apple. It's a proprietary interface, and we explained to you why that right answer is right. So you would know why you would do something related to that. This interface, though, something you commonly are seeing phased out. I've still got some devices, though, that I have that are still working, and they still use Lightning. So you will still see these Lightning interfaces being used. Maybe we'll quickly get rid of those and move more to USB-C as time goes on. Now, we got 3 other answers here that were not the right answer. In my practice exams book, I document every answer, whether it's right or whether it's wrong. I explain to you why the right answers are right. And perhaps, I would say perhaps even more importantly, explain to you why the wrong answers are wrong. This is the part that I think a lot of practice exams don't do very well, is explaining to me why I don't know this. It's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to become more familiar with this content. Why aren't we providing this to folks? Well, in my book, every single question is documented this way. So if you answered connect a server to a display monitor, you'd say, oh, that's right. That's not Lightning. Maybe I was thinking of Thunderbolt. But I explain why that is not the right answer. Increase the available memory device. I explain why that cannot be used with a Lightning connection. And remotely controlling a remote device will also explain why that is perhaps not the most specific thing about Lightning. Although if you've ever plugged in a mobile phone, an iPhone to your Mac using a Lightning connector, there are ways to do remote control of that, but that wasn't our question. The question specifically was talking about most likely to be used, and it was written that way through an exact reason, so we can at least understand why it works that way. So of course, we're able to make that work really both directions from there. So we've got a lot that we can do over those wired connections. In fact, I pull up my wired connection so that I can look at the logs on a phone, so I can transfer the logs down. I can send commands back to the phone. It's a great way to connect to these devices and be able to send information in both directions. It's just a data connection. It's like your USB connection. It's just a Lightning. It's just a proprietary form of that for the Apple devices. So something that can really help you if you're someone who's working on understanding more about Apple technologies, understanding more about certain interface types, these are all things we need to know for the exam. If you read through this question and you didn't understand any of it, down here at the bottom is a QR code that links you to the video that I used to make this question. So you can go back and watch. What do you mean lightning? Which one was the lightning connector? Oh, I can watch the video now that shows me the lightning connector. And it's a QR code in case you're using this in the PDF version, or you can click right here on the link. This is a hot link. We could click on that. But if you're in the book, you could also easily go to the answer in a book, use your mobile phone, and watch the video on your phone or your tablet while you're reading the physical book. It's one of the benefits. That's a good QR code. That's a good use of a QR code, is using it in something that way where you can reference that information very quickly. When you're done with this question, we can use the back button. If you didn't know, many PDF readers have a back button in the PDF reader itself. We can use it right there at the end. We'll go back button, and we're back to where we started. There is the next place. So now we can go to the next question on our list and perform the same process over and over and over again. Those are my practice exams. We have these available for Core 1 and Core 2. If you purchase them for both exams at the same time, there's a bit of a price break. If you buy it with our course notes, combine those together, also a price break. So a little bit of a benefit you get for supporting the things that we're doing here. I support you back. Thank you so much for that support. Something that might help you also for your studies. And I think it's a great way to really see if you understand everything you know before walking into that exam room. Find out more about this on our website, professormesser.com/core1pe, or use the main menus on the website to look for the 220-1201 exam and then the practice exams underneath that menu. Well, this is also a good place to remind you that CompTIA sticks to the list of exam objectives practically to the letter. Someone was mentioning in our Discord just before going live today, they were wondering, hey, is this topic on the exam? I said, you need to download this right away. It's free, and it lists out every single topic you would need to know for your exam. Every single one. They stick to this list so tight that if you know every topic that's in this list, you can't help but pass your exam. There's no way you're going to fail if you know everything. You can find these at professormesser.com/objectives. Takes you over to the CompTIA website where you can download and look at these objectives. This is the objective list, and it tells you everything. We did port numbers today, for example. For example, in section 2.1, compare and contrast transmission control protocol and user datagram protocol ports, protocols and their purposes. And here's all the protocols. So you got FTP and SSH and Telnet, SMTP and DNS and DHCP and HTTP. You're starting to see some of these we talked with already. So there's SMB, there's HTTPS, there's RDP. These are the things that we talked about to be able to do that. This is a great document. It tells you everything. It's a great checklist. It's a great way to confirm that you really know what's going to be asked of you on the exam. And if you know all of this, you're going to do great. You're going to be fine at being able to answer these questions on the exam. This is what you should focus on, is those objectives. If it's not in the objectives, you don't need to know it for your A+ exam. That's how good these objectives are. Find out more at professormesser.com/objectives. Well, we do one of these study groups every month for the Core 1. We do another one for Core 2. We do a Network Plus study group, and we do a Security Plus study group, which all have pretty much the same format. I create brand new questions for you every month. We step through these questions live and online. We always have a good time with that. And then, of course, I answer your questions in the after show. For July, we do have an A+ study group 2 days from now on the 9th. Come back for that one if you're studying for your Core 2 exam. We also have our Network Plus study group this month on the 17th and our Security Plus study group on the 22nd. We've also set our August dates already. The August dates are 4th and 6th for the Core 1 and Core 2 study groups. Network Plus is on August the 12th, and we have Security Plus on August the 19th. I'm already talking about August already. How did that happen? Well, there we are. Those are the study groups coming up. If you're watching this and it's well after August and you're wondering, when is the next live event going to be? I'm glad you asked. It's right there on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/calendar or click the events link at the top of the Professor Messer website. We also have an events channel on our Discord where I duplicate that information. These dates can sometimes change. So if you want to know if we're still on for that date, you can always check the official calendar, professormesser.com/calendar. Well, I've gone through an hour of Q&A, but there's more Q&A. In this case, though, I'm going to answer your questions in our after show. Stick around for that. Coming up next, you can just stay right where you are. We're not stopping the stream. We're just continuing. We're only halfway through. If you want to look at it that way. Don't forget about our discounted vouchers. If you're in the U.S. or Canada or U.S. territory, you can get these vouchers for less than the price than you would pay at the CompTIA website. Go to professormesser.com/vouchers. Don't forget about our course notes, our practice exams, our success bundles, and so much more. You can find that at professormesser.com/1201success. And if you're on social media, well, so are we. We'd like to find you there. Hunt for us over on YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube. Don't forget about our daily pop quiz questions at professormesser.com/X/LinkedIn/Instagram and /Facebook. And of course, if you're looking to find us for our live text chat, live communication, live study groups that people put together, it's all on our Discord at professormesser.com/Discord. Well, that brings us to the end of our main study group. Stick around for our after show coming up in just a few seconds. Thank you so much for joining us. We do love doing these live streams, and we couldn't do it without you. Thanks for being here. And we'll see you next time on our A+ study group. Okay. Let me take a sip. One moment, please. Now, let's do more, shall we? Let's do some Q&A. It would be good if I was able to do this. There we go. See how that works? It has been a while since I did a live stream. You get a little rusty. You go more than a week without a live stream. You end up looking like this. You're wondering, why can't I do it? There you go. You just have to click the right buttons to make it all work. Well, now we're at the part of our show where I can at least give you an option, an idea, a chance to submit your question for this. The question that I would like you to submit, you can submit using that same link that we had before, professormesser.com/QA. That is where you could submit that link. And I even put on the screen that you can submit the link there. I say that you can submit questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. I will be moderating these questions. So you can submit those. They go into the queue, and then I sift through the queue to try to find things that would be interesting for us to see, to know about, to be able to look at. So that's exactly what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to go into this list and see what options you might have to be able to do that. Okay, let's have a look at some of the questions that are coming in. And I think some of these are super good. Now, if you were looking through these and working through the details, there's some great questions you guys submitted. So let's just start at the top and let's work our way through these questions. You can submit your question at any time. You're not too late. You can put it in using the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Let's have a look at this first question. Let's move it to a published view. This is from Diego, who asks, "Hello, Professor Messer. Hope you're doing great." I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for asking. I'm preparing for taking the Network Plus exam on August 17th. Now, as we sit here today, it is July the 7th. So you've got about 40 days or so to be able to work through this. Just over a month to be able to make this work. August 17th. Diego continues. Diego says, "I've watched 22 videos and bought the course notes. Do you think I have enough time to have a good solid base on the exam? Thanks." This is a question that I think could really apply to any exam that you would be taking. And I do get questions like this all the time. I'm planning to take my Security Plus. How much time should I study? I'm planning to take the Core 1 exam for A+. How long does that take? I'm planning to sit for the Core 2. How many weeks should I study? These are important things to know, and they certainly help you when you're scheduling things out. Now, from Diego's perspective, it sounds like there's a date that has been set for you. And we're going to go from that perspective. Sometimes this happens, especially with an employer who might have a particular project or a particular requirement, a contractual agreement that requires them to have a certain number of Network Plus people on staff. Maybe there's that many certified folks that are part of your technician group. And that's part of the contracts and things that you have. So let's talk about timeframes. Generally speaking, broadly speaking, with the CompTIA A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus exams, for people that are starting from scratch, they're starting with really no significant technology knowledge in these topics, it tends to take somewhere around 2 to 3 months on average. That means that a number of people are taking half the folks are taking more than 2 or 3 months, and half the folks are taking less than 2 or 3 months. That's the average for you. That means that you'll probably, if you're starting from scratch, it might take you a little longer to get this done. But if you're someone who is already been in the industry for a while, maybe you already have your A+ exam, you've been doing a little bit of networking, you understand pings and trace routes and what these things do for you and how they would work, then you're probably doing a little bit better than most, and maybe you can squeeze that time, make it a little bit shorter on a study time. Ultimately, you want to focus on what's expected of you to be able to answer these questions. So I'm quickly going to go over and grab a Network Plus set of exam objectives. I think that would be really useful for us. I say really quick, as if that's really what happened, but it is not. Because it turns out it's really hard to talk and do something at the same time and do it correctly. How do I know? Well, good to meet you. This is, just come to a live stream. You'll see it every single time as I stumble through trying to find the information I need for you. This is a set of exam objectives for the Network Plus exam, the N10009, which is also version 9. So as we go through this objectives, look, the format very similar to what you have for A+. We just went through those. And they take you through all of the things you need to know. Section 1.1, explain concepts related to the Open Systems Interconnection Reference Model. Section 1.2, compare and contrast networking applications, appliances, applications, and functions. And then we have all these appliances listed. We have all these applications listed. We have all these functions listed. Next one is 1.3, summarize cloud concepts and connectivity options. We have to know all of these cloud-based technologies and formats. Section 1.4, oh, look, more port numbers. Here's a good example, though. These are the port numbers you need to know for Network Plus. A lot of overlap. FTP, SSH, there's SMTP, there's DNS, there's DHCP, there's HTTPS, there's SMB, there's RDP. So a lot of the port numbers we did today, you already know them. So again, this is a really good example where you can take that time frame for study and shrink it down. But here's where you would really determine how much time it's going to take. You go through each one of these sections and you start to see how long is that taking you. How long is it taking you to be able to look at a single section and see that software-defined network, SDN, and software-defined wide area network, SD-WAN, has an application-aware function, zero-touch provisioning, it is transport agnostic, and has a central policy management. What does that mean? Why is that important? What does that bring to the table? Why do people use this? So like most exams, not everything is spelled out in the broad list of objectives. They give you what you need to know, though. Those 4 topics, as they apply to SDN and SD-WAN, we didn't need to know what those 4 things are. Now, I will tell you, SDN and SD-WAN are big topics. They are big technology topics. You could spend weeks learning about these, but you don't have to. You only have to know 4 things about them. Application aware, what does that mean? Zero touch provisioning, what does that do for you? Transport agnostic, religion got into this somehow. And then central policy management, what does that mean? What are we talking about? So those are the 4 things. If you know those 4 things, you know everything you need to know for this exam, Network Plus, as it relates to SDN and SD-WAN. That's it. So that's why I say stick to the objectives. go to this list. And as you start going through them, you may find, oh, this is going to go pretty fast for me. I'll have this done in a month. Or you might find, oh, doing this by the 15th of August, that's going to be tight. You may have to decide, okay, I've got to, instead of spending time in the video games at night, I'm going to do this for a month, and we're going to get through this. And then the video gaming will be so much better once we are Network Plus certified. So there's decisions we have to make, but I think this is a fantastic checklist. This tells you everything you need to know about what you know already and what you don't know. Knowing what you don't know is an important thing, and this document tells us the official exam objectives. And again, you can get that directly from the CompTIA website at professormesser.com/objectives. And I have links. They'll take you right over to the CompTIA website where you can download all of these. That's what I would recommend. And I think if you're somebody who is studying for an exam, August 17th, over a month from today, and you know you have to get this done, I think you can do that. I think you can set up timing for your life and processes and something you do every day. Maybe you wake up earlier. Maybe you're a morning person. You wake up early. You spend an extra hour every day going through this content. Maybe you like to stay up at night. Maybe you're a night owl. Maybe, normally you go to bed at this time. Now I'm going to bed an hour later, and I'll just cram that extra hour of study in to the things that we're doing already. You do have to make some changes. You haven't been studying for your Network Plus exam up to this point. Now you are studying for your Network Plus exam. Something has to make a change, right? You have to be able to know that you've got this study material down. And there's a lot of content here. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of objectives. You have to know every single one of them because any of them could show up on your exam. Make sure you step through and know everything there is to know from those objectives, and you're going to do just fine on this exam, August 17th. You'll have all of this in your brain. You'll sit down, you'll earn your Network Plus, and you're off to the next big thing. Let's see what other questions you might have sent in this list and what is there. So we mentioned earlier in our study group, we were talking about working with and plugging into our firewall the ability to browse on our intranet. And I mentioned to you that, well, it could be HTTP, but let's face it, it's really HTTPS because that's what we all use today. Victor wants to take it a step further. Victor wants some clarification. I know you mentioned that HTTPS is only being used now as it's more secure, but if you're hosting a server with uptime kuma or nginx, maybe that's what you're running, wouldn't that be HTTP? In most cases, no. Most web servers these days have a way to configure HTTPS on them. So nginx, for example, I use both Apache HTTP and nginx on my server. I know there's different things going on there, and there's a reason for doing both of them. But I use both of them, and both of them are configured to use HTTPS. In fact, it takes anything inbound that is using HTTP and it says, we're not doing that. Let's redirect you over here to the HTTPS side. So you can't even go over to professormesser.com and be able to use it in a non-encrypted form. Everything sent to my server is redirected to be secure by default. And that is exactly how we want it to be able to do that way. Now, there might be an option, though, and there certainly is an option on the servers that I use today. If I wanted to allow HTTP communication, if I wanted to allow non-encrypted communication to my web server, I could. We could absolutely turn that on, and that's the way it would work. Frowned upon on the internet, however, not what we want. Everything should be encrypted, and therefore it is going to be that way. So if you're hosting a server, the default when it comes up is probably to be an HTTP. It probably does not have the certificates on it to be able to do the encryption, or the certificates themselves would not apply to the configuration of that server. So normally the web server, you're right, you would start up with HTTP, configure it to be secure, and then you would effectively turn off the HTTP side. It's how we do it in the real world. In practical use, the best practice is to do it that way. So at least we have that going. But in fact, most of the new equipment, so if you bought a firewall, a brand new firewall, and you plugged it in, it's probably not even going to talk to you over the management port via HTTP. You're going to have to use HTTPS. Probably doesn't even listen on port 80 because it's a security device. And in fact, most devices these days work in that same way. And that's why I said it could be HTTP, but it isn't, right? We know it's not. We know it's HTTPS and being able to work through it. So it's something I think you should think about too. Let's do some more questions. You can send these questions in at any time using the link on your screen. Let's see what we have here. Let's focus. This is an interesting question. Not that the question itself is interesting inherently, but it's interesting how many times I hear this question, which makes it a good question. So this question asked from my good friend Anonymous, who says, I'm wanting to get into cybersecurity. I mainly do IT as a hobby, but I have work experience in other trades over 15 years. Would you recommend I do A+ and then do Security Plus, or should I just skip A+? Thanks. Now that is something I think most of us would think about if we wanted to get into the world of IT security. And I specifically say IT security, even though Anonymous has said cybersecurity, because a good comparison was made on our Discord recently. When you say cybersecurity, you're saying, I want to get into medicine. When you say, I want to get into cybersecurity, that's a big, broad term that doesn't actually mean anything specific. It's just one very big grouping of different things that you could be doing. Here, we're talking specifically about IT security. And that's because most of what we do with A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus is on the IT side, not the computer science side. So application development, hardware development, device driver programming, the creation of hardware combination with software, that's computer science. We don't tend to do that with our CompTIA exams because CompTIA, Microsoft, Amazon, a lot of these certifications that you see in the IT world aren't dealing on the computer science side. They're focusing on the side that deals with operations, keeping these systems up and running, keeping them secure, keeping all of the data flowing at high rates of speed, and making sure everything is patched and everything is safe. And I think IT security is a great place to be. My background is in IT security, not only in ways from an administrator perspective, but also from someone who is trying to integrate next generation firewalls. That was my focus in the world of IT security. Now, when you start looking at the jobs out there for IT security, I think this is where this question should lead you. Because at this point, I don't think, and most people that ask this question, I don't think they've spent a lot of research time looking at cybersecurity, IT security jobs that are available out there, and what the minimum requirements might be. There are very few IT security related jobs out there that don't require some knowledge of operating systems and networking. There's not a lot of entry level into the world of IT security. IT security tends to be a place that you work up to, that you become an expert in all things operating system, then you become an expert in all things networking, and then finally you can you're qualified to move into one of those IT security roles. You don't tend to see IT security entry level. And that's because you do need a very strong knowledge base and a good bit of experience before even getting to that point. I know that's different than what the internet tends to tell us. I see a lot of organizations, I see a lot of advertising out there of people saying, get into cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is all the rage. You need to become cybersecurity certified. Get your job in cybersecurity. What they don't tell you is that, oh yeah, but first you're going to need to work in some type of support role. You need to understand everything about operating systems that you can. You need to become an expert on the network side. Then you can work in cybersecurity. They don't tell you that first part though. They kind of leave that out because IT security and the word cybersecurity, it's sexy. It's enticing. It wants you want to do that. The movies show the security stuff and it's really cool. And I want to do that one. But the challenge is finding a job in security. Now, as I mentioned, most of the jobs relating to IT security are not entry-level jobs. I said most, which means there must be some that are IT security entry-level jobs, and they are. One of the most common ones of these would be would be something in a SOC, and not that kind of SOC. SOC, a Security Operations Center. That's an abbreviation, an acronym for Security Operations Center. And most big companies have a Security Operations Center. You can think of it as a help desk, but for security-related tasks. Because if you're a big company, you're going to have a regular help desk. You're probably also going to have a NOC, a Network Operations Center. All the network propeller heads, they sit in that room and they monitor and make sure that all the networks are up and running constantly. Well, there's another room over here that's your SOC, Security Operations Center, which of course is a different set of requirements and different things they're looking at. We're looking at keeping everything on the network secure. We're not so concerned about the network links as we are the security of the network links. So you'd have these multiple places where you might be able to start. But at the Security Operations Center, there's almost always a kind of a tier 1 person, a level 1 person who does the basic triage. Like I said, it's sort of a help desk position, but for security. So you're answering the calls, you're answering the emails, you're looking at the messages coming in, you're maybe evaluating information that's on a dashboard or a set of reports, and then you're taking that information and you're giving it to the people that can fix those particular problems. That's a great entry level into the world of security. I don't know that it's a pure security job. It's more of an entry level help desk triage type position, but you are learning all of those security lingo. You're becoming familiar with the nomenclature of security, understanding the next-gen firewall and where the IPS functionality sits, and are we using a proxy to do our SSL decryption, and how the SSL VPN is integrating with the centralized user database, and do we configure any site-to-site VPNs, and what type of certificates are being sent out, and are we sending all of our data to the SIM? And there's plenty to do on the security side, to be sure. And a lot of this could be very entry level. So there are not the number of entry level SOC jobs as there are pure entry level jobs into IT. So I don't necessarily want to encourage or give you the idea that there's tons of these Security Operations Center jobs around, because there isn't. Relatively speaking, there are a very, very small number of jobs like that in the IT security role. The way that most people get into IT security is they learn everything they can about Windows and about Linux and about Mac OS and about mobile operating systems. They learn everything they can about those operating systems, which is a lot. They could take you years of your life to become proficient in those operating systems. Then they take that knowledge and they upgrade that knowledge into the networking side of things. So now you're learning about the switches and the routers and the designing of the network and the redundancy and how data flows and how applications work at the protocol levels. That knowledge, combined with your operating system knowledge, is perfect for moving up into the world of IT security. So as you're looking at this question, should I do A+ first or should I skip A+? I think the first thing you should do is find an IT security job in your area, in your geography where you live, that you feel that you would qualify for. That someone could look at your experience and say, yep, you're qualified for that. See what jobs are out there. You may find there are not quite as many as you might think. There might be fewer than you might expect. Or maybe in your area, maybe there's tons of Security Operations Center jobs out there. I don't know. In fact, the only way you would know is if you went and did the research. So go do that. Go out to your favorite job hosting website. Go to LinkedIn Jobs. Go to any of the job. Go to Dice. Go to, there's tons out there and they're different depending on where you are in the world. Go find that particular site. Now look for Security Operations Center. Look for security analyst. Look for security administrator. Look for IT security. Look for different keywords along those lines and look at what jobs are available out there. And then look at the experience they want. I think you'll find most IT security positions, they're going to have a pretty strong experience requirement from that. So figure out what makes sense for you. If you're looking at that job and they go, well, you need this certification from Palo Alto Networks, and you need a CISSP, and you need to have 5 years of experience in IT, specifically in networking, well, you might say, okay, I don't qualify for that one. So we'll put that in our list of not there yet, and we'll look at another position. Sift through those. Find as many as you can that you think fit what you can provide, that someone can look at you and go, yeah, you qualify for that job. Sure, you're in the running for that one. And then find out what they're asking for. Do they ask for A+? Do they ask for Security Plus? Do they ask for any certifications? Who knows? This would be a good thing to kind of figure out. So if you're someone who's kind of going through the process of the job hunt, or you're wondering, do I really need A+? Do I really need Network Plus? Do I really need Security Plus? That's where you should go, is to the jobs to find out, because I can't answer that question. I'm not hiring you, not hiring anyone. So if I'm not horrible to ask for that, I need to go ask people who are hiring. And the best way you can do that is look at the jobs that are out there and what they're asking for. I think that gives you a good foundation too. I think that sets you up to understand, is this something that will work with my knowledge? Are there jobs even available in my area? And you might be able to put together a pretty good set of pathways, of objectives yourself to say, well, I'm not yet ready for that job, but they said I need a knowledge of this and a knowledge of this. So let me go start on that pathway. It'll take me years to get there, but it's a long-term goal. And when I'm done after that, I will be qualified to put my resume in for that particular job. You'll be able to apply for those jobs and see what makes sense for doing those. So that's up to you. Figure out the details and see what people are asking for. They'll be able to answer your question. You will be effectively able to answer that question yourself. And nobody else really can, because we don't know what jobs are available in your area and what people are asking for. This is more of a logistical question about the A+ exams themselves. This is from Jason, who asks, can I take the CompTIA A+ 2 2012-01 version 15 Core 1 exam before I start studying the Core 2 part? So as many of you know, you have to pass 2 different exams to earn your A+ certification. You need to pass the Core 1 exam, and you need to pass, wait for it, Core 2 exam. There's 1 and 2. That's it. There's not 4. There's just 2. Core 1 and Core 2. These 2 exams are independent of each other. There's very little overlap between these 2 exams. They're effectively 2 standalone exams at this point. They didn't always used to be that way, but these days they're pretty much 2 standalone exams. And they're both big exams. This is not one exam that they split up into 2 pieces. This is 4 exams that they combined into two exams, really, is what they did. That's a lot of content. So the first thing I'll tell people is only study for 1 at a time. You only need to study for 1 of these at one time, because they are so different in their content. You could study for everything relating to one exam and really never touch the information you need to know for the other exam, and vice versa. So that's one thing you should know. Just stick to 1. Don't do both at the same time. Just 1 exam at a time, please. That's an important place to start. And you don't have to take both exams on the same day, thankfully. Some people have gone through this entire process and not realized they booked both exams on the same day, not realizing they didn't need to do that. Go look at 1 exam at a time. Go look at, maybe start with the Core 1 or Core 2, but here's the other thing you need to know. You can do either one first. You don't have to do them in the order of Core 1 first, Core 2 second. You could do Core 2 first and Core 1 second if you wanted to. So it doesn't matter the order you do them in. You just have to pass both of those exams before both exams are retired. And as we mentioned earlier, that's years from now. So you got plenty of time to study for both of these exams right now. So this is where the important part is the study part. Stick to 1 set of exams. So pick 1. Let's say that you want to start with Core 2. Great. So sit down with Core 2. You learn everything about Windows operating systems and Linux and Mac OS and security and the troubleshooting and everything that's on the Core 2 exam. You get all of that Core 2 information in your brain. You're reading your Core 2 book. You're going through Core 2 practice questions. You did some Core 2 labs. You now go and take the Core 2 exam. You pass the Core 2 exam. then you can forget all of that if you want to. Then you're done with Core 2. Now you can readjust and redirect over to Core 1. And now go through the exact same process with Core 1. Watch the Core 1 videos, read a good Core 1 book, go through some good Core 1 labs, go through some good Core 1 Q&A, go take the Core 1 exam, pass the Core 1 exam, which may be 3 months or more after you took the Core 2. Take the Core 1 exam. You've got both of them. You passed both of them. You are now A+ certified. That's the process. So I say separate them out. Don't try to learn everything at one time. For most of us, that's the way it's going to go. There have been people that have come to my site that said, I had the A+ 10 years ago. I've been working in this industry. My employer now needs me to get the A+ certification. I'm just going to watch these videos in a week and go take both the exams on the same day. And they did, and they passed both of them. But they already knew all this content. They already gone through all of the objectives. They already knew all of this. So there really wasn't much studying to do. They were just making sure they knew all the topics and nothing was a surprise before they sat down and took both of those exams. That's pretty unusual. That's a rare animal. So do not do that. Don't even try to do that part of it. In fact, even if I was going to take both of these exams, I probably would not do them the same day just because it's a lot of sitting and a lot of going through exams and a lot of doing this. I don't know, I probably would. Now I'm thinking about it. I don't want to go back to the exam center. But that's why I tell people focus on one at a time. Unless you've already been in this industry for a while, you've already got the experience, you've already got the knowledge, well, then obviously you might be able to do them both on the same day. But for everyone else, don't do that to yourself. There's no reason to do it. It's much easier to study half of this at a time. That's one of the best ways to go about making that happen. So I would say you can take the Core 1 before you start to study for the Core 2. You can take the Core 2 before you start to study for the Core 1. Pick whichever one works for you and go with it. And I think you'll be fine. Don't try to push yourself into all this Core 1, Core 2 stuff. You'll find that it becomes very overwhelming very, very quickly. So make sure that's the case as well. Let's keep going through these questions. There's a lot, some great questions on here, by the way. Thank you for sending these. This is more of another logistical type question, but one we don't get very often. So I think we'll talk about this one. Again, from my good friend Anonymous, who asks, does CompTIA repeat performance-based questions? Does CompTIA repeat performance-based questions? Had to do it. This is, it's difficult to know the context for this question, by the way. Let's say by repeat, I'm assuming you mean on the same exam, which actually doesn't make sense in the context of the question. You might have a little more you can provide here. If you have some context you can provide in the chat, you're more than welcome to put it there because I am watching the chat as we go. But on a single exam, the way this works is CompTIA has a lot of questions in a question pool. Let's say they have 1,000 questions in a question pool. I don't know how many they have. Let's say they have 1,000. Obviously, on your exam, you're going to get up to 90. Let's say that they're going to give you the maximum you could possibly get on your exam. So they're going to give you 90 questions on your exam. A handful of those are going to be performance-based questions. So on your exam, you might get 4 or 5 performance-based questions. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but somewhere in there is a good average, 4 or 5 questions. I tend to say you're going to get 5. Just be ready for 5 performance-based questions. If there's a little bit more, you're fine with that. If there's a little bit less, you're okay with that and making that happen. But on a single exam, you obviously are not going to get repeated questions. You're only going to get 1 for that exam. But let's say you don't pass the exam. And let's say that you go back and take the exam again a month later. You might get, because of the random number generator, some of the questions you get on your second exam, it is obviously going to be a different set of questions from the pool, but statistically, some of them might overlap. You might get questions again that you saw on the previous exam. CompTIA, I guess they could prevent that if they wanted to, but they don't want to. They want to just grab the pool, make it random, give you a set of random questions and have you answer them. Now, between versions of exams, now, as I mentioned, every 3 or 3.5 years or so, CompTIA updates their exam objectives. So there's a new version of the exam. For example, we're looking right now at the 220-1201 and the 220-1202. The previous exams were the 1101 and the 1102. Some of the questions on those exams probably do show up on the 1200 series exams. On the older exams, probably show up on the newer exams because the content didn't change for those topics. But on these exams, they tend to change 20 to 30% of the exam, sometimes more. The last Security Plus exam, half of the exam was brand new. 50% of the exam was new. But for A+, we tend to see 20 to 30% of a change between exam versions. For that reason, that means that 70 to 80% of the exam may not have changed very much. And so some of the previous questions they had, maybe they brought over. Maybe they didn't have changed very much about them. Maybe they're very similar. That could certainly happen as well. But on the same exams, on the same versions, you're not going to get a lot of repeated information. You're certainly not going to get a repeat of performance-based questions unless you are unfortunate enough not to pass the first time, and then you go back and you have to take the exam again. You might see some repeats on that one for sure. Let's keep going through our list and making all of these things happen. Some great questions coming through. Thank you for sending these in. This is a good question that I don't get a lot, and I think it's worth talking a little bit about. Ryan asks, what concepts in the A+ Core 1 do you think come up most on the job? Of course, this is now going to depend on what job you're talking about, because some jobs might talk about some things on the Core 1 exam, other jobs might not be. So I think we should go look at the exam objectives. All my questions seem to come back to the exam objectives, don't they? Well, that's because there's a reason for that. Let's go to the Core 1 exam objectives. I would first, let me say, and I see this argument about the A+ exam all the time on the internet, is that this exam is so outdated. The information on this exam doesn't even show up on modern networks. And then at that point, they describe topics that are on A+ exams from 10 years ago. So they're saying there's no token ring networking anymore, and yet you have to know token ring networking for the exam. You don't deal with interrupts anymore or IRQs, and yet IRQs are on the A+ exam. And thankfully on the internet, most people will say, no, none of those. Token ring is not on the A+ exam. Interrupts are not on the A+ exam. For the reason that this person just mentioned, we don't deal with those technologies anymore. We don't work at all with those technologies. And see, not even that important that you know what they are anymore. So of course they're not on the exam. CompTIA updates this list every 3 years, which leads me to make the statement, and you can argue about this one or not. Everything that's on this exam, I think you would be very easily, you would find everything on these lists and this set of exam objectives. If you walk into any data center, you'll pretty much find every single one of these technologies in that data center. The A+ exam is not here to teach you the most cutting edge technologies that have existed in the last 3 months. They're to give you an understanding of the technologies you could potentially run into if you walk into a standard type of data center. If you walk into a significantly sized organization, you're going to see everything that's on this list. And let's just take one section at random, section 3.4. Compare and contrast storage devices. Hard drives. I need to know about spindle speeds and form factors, including 2.5 and 3-inch drives. Okay, that's that. Although hard drives are being phased out over time for mobile devices and for desktop computers, we still use hard drives extensively in our storage networks. So hard drives aren't going away anytime soon, and they're technologies you're probably going to work with, so they're in the objectives. That's a perfectly reasonable objective. Let's go to the next one. Solid state drives, including non-volatile memory express, NVMe, and SATA. We also have PCIe for PCI Express. You've got serial attached SCSI, which is SAS type networks. Those are all different interfaces for storage communication. And pretty much all of these are indeed being used across a very normal network or data center configuration. So it's important to know about NVMe and SATA and PCI Express and small computer system interface in a serial mode, serial attached storage, serial attached SCSI storage, SAS. So those are important to know as well. What about form factors? M.2 and mSATA. This is where you start getting into more nuanced things. M2, very common. mSATA, not as common. So I think this might be one place you could at least argue, wait, that one I don't see a lot of. Yeah, but in some places you do see a lot of it. So this is one of those times where you'll probably work with most of these in most technology jobs. But I think this is one where it's important to know these because you're going to run into them eventually. For example, you take a job at a help desk, you're probably going to need to know about hard drives. You're probably going to need about solid state drives. You may not, though, get a lot of questions about RAID. The redundant array of independent disks or redundant array of inexpensive disks, depending on where you grew, when and where you grew up. RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, RAID 6, and RAID 10. Unless you're working with drive arrays, you're probably not going to run into that. Maybe on some operating system configurations, very unique operating system configurations, that's another one you might find RAID. But for the most part, that's just sort of off to the side. But RAID is used everywhere. Every company has RAID. Everywhere you walk in, every company is going to be doing some type of RAID on some system. So you need to know about this. That's why it's in the exam objectives. Removable drives, flash drives, and memory cards. And lastly, if you want to argue about stuff you don't need to know, optical drives might be the only one in this list for section 3.4 that you could probably make a case that we're probably not going to be doing a lot of that on our network right now, which is probably true. But I guarantee you there's probably a backup system somewhere that still has optical drives of backups that you might have to restore at some point. So having some knowledge of optical drives isn't really too far off the mark. I would argue probably, and we can talk about this in a couple years, when the next exam objectives come out for whatever the next version will be, the 1301 and 1302. When we get to that one, is optical drive still going to be in it or not? Probably won't be. They'll take that off the list and then nobody's going to have anything to really complain about ever. But I think this is why people often look at this list of objectives and say, look how outdated that is. They're still making you learn about optical drives. Yeah, because there's still optical drives out there. You'll still probably need to troubleshoot an optical drive configuration. You might have backups on optical drives and you're going to need to restore from one of those backups. What if somebody handed you an optical drive? You've no knowledge of optical drives at all. And you're like, what is this? Is this a movie? Are we going to watch a movie? No, this is our backup. What? You can put backups on this optical drive? You need to know these things. These are important. And that's why these lists are in here. I know I have gone through every single objective in this list hundreds of times, literally hundreds of times. There's nothing in this list that I would say would be outdated, that would be antiquated, that you would not find on a normal network. All these are pretty spot on. Even when you get into printers, people talk about this one all the time. They talk about laser printers, inkjet printers, thermal printers, and impact printers. Impact printers, where you have a ribbon and there's a print head and it's hitting the page. How archaic this is. Well, yes, it is, but it's also still being used. It's very niche. Not every organization is going to have impact printers sitting as your main printer, but I'll bet somewhere in the back room on a specialized platform, if you've ever been in an airport, if you've ever rented a car, you'll still run into impact printers out there. They're there. So again, A+ is not about the latest technologies that came down the line in the last 3 months. It's about every technology you could reasonably expect to find in a very standard data center. These things do change over time. They update the objectives over time. And you will, of course, find your way through as you start working through them. But I think everything that's on that list is in scope for what most people would see in a data center. So I don't accept the arguments that this is an outdated exam, because it isn't. And whenever somebody mentions that, my first response is always, that's a reasonable thing to say. What topics do you feel are outdated? What topics do you feel are antiquated? Which ones do you think would not be in an average data center? At which point I usually don't get a response back, because at that point they've gone and looked at the objectives and realized, token ring isn't on here. RAM bus memory isn't on here. These things that I thought were on the exam aren't actually on the exam, which is good, because now they understand that those types of things really aren't there. And it is more of an exam that teaches you about what you need to know on today's networks, not networks from 10 years ago, for sure. Let's keep, I'm at the top of the hour, but we can fit in another couple, right? We can get another question in to do some of these things. Question says, would you ever consider teaching other CompTIA courses in the future, such as CEH? CEH is not a CompTIA exam. CEH is from a different organization, and I will never, ever do a CEH course. And by never, I know people say you shouldn't say never. I'm never doing a CEH course, just so you're aware of those things. There are certain topics, certain things I will simply not do, and that is one of them. CEH is from the EC Council. It's the ethical hacker, certified ethical hacker, CEH. Certified ethical hacker exam from the EC Council, I think is their name. And that's a different company. I have in the world of certifications, there's a lot of people here that we tend to talk to each other. We tend to have conversations about, hey, what's good? What's bad? How you doing? What's happening here? What do you think of that? And the number of times people have had something positive to say about the certified ethical hacker has been none, has been 0 times. In fact, I can personally say that given their background and their focus on technology, I'm not really going to be looking at doing any certified ethical hacker courses. I don't know if they really want people to do them anyway. That's a very unusual certification, and it's kind of locked down. There's a lot of nonsense going on about that one. But other ones, sure. Think about the things that you might want to know about. More networking courses, more security courses, maybe some Amazon or Microsoft cloud courses. Let's do some Linux course stuff. There's plenty of courses I would love to do. So yes, the question is, would I ever consider teaching other courses? Sure. And something other than CompTIA courses? Absolutely. I'm not locked into CompTIA. In fact, in the past, you've seen that we've had Cisco CCENT and CCNA content. We've had Microsoft certification content. So there's other things that we've done in the past. Right now, I think all we have is CompTIA, but that doesn't mean it has to be that way to be able to work through it. But CEH, nope, never get back together with the CEH. Not going to happen. When I say never, what I'm trying to say is never ever going to do that one. If you see me releasing anything relating to CEH, you need to call somebody for me. Okay. Just call the authorities, let them know someone's taken over my body. There's somebody else. Just know something bad has happened, and we need to get me the help that I desperately deserve. Let's keep going through your questions. We have time on this list. I know there's sort of a rousing ideas we have about certifications and which ones to take and all of those. And that's right. It's one of those situations. I'll tap one time for yes and twice for no. We'll figure out something. We'll make it work. Let's keep going through this list. And the ones that are here. A lot of great questions, by the way. Let's keep going. A lot of these, some of these are repeats, and I want to take it so I can repeat what I've already said, but nobody wants that. So I'm not. So if I apologize if you ask me questions, there was a question that came through. Is there any Linux material in A+? It's the exam objectives. So go look at the exam objectives. Have you looked at the exam objectives? You should download the exam objectives. They're the best. They will tell you everything you need to know about what's on the exam, and perhaps more importantly, what isn't on the exam. CompTIA's exam objectives that is the list. I've had people grab the objectives and they said, yeah, but I went to this site and that site over there that's not CompTIA said that this thing is on the exam. I said, stop listening to people who are not CompTIA. CompTIA, it's their exam. They made the exam. They wrote the exam. They wrote the exam objectives. There's the link. So don't even listen to what I have to say. Go to the objectives. Now, the reality is I use the objectives to build my courses. So I know that I am spot on with the objectives. I don't have to worry about that part. Why other people feel a need to go outside the scope of what CompTIA has already told them is on the exam is, I don't know why they do that. I don't understand why all of those are on that list. But, there is that. There are people working through the details of those. But you will see that happen. That is certainly an important thing to think about as well. Some people and I see this a lot, the chat room is saying, yeah, but on my exam, I had this topic. Yeah, but on my exam, I had this topic. They're in the exam objectives. The fact that you don't know they're in the exam objectives is troubling to me at this point. It's worrisome because I think I've said a million times today, you should be in the exam objectives. So make sure, go to the objectives. If you get a question about smart technology, it's in the objectives. You get a question about staples that are jamming your printer, it's in the objectives. Get a question about, somebody in the chat room mentioned, got a question about projectors. It's in the objectives. They're in there. So that's how you're going to know what might be asked of you. There should never be a surprise on your exam. I will say that CompTIA does occasionally ask a question that is not from the exam objectives. Wait a second. I just said that everything you're going to get from the objectives, except for this maybe one question that they might give you. If you do happen to see a question and it has nothing to do with this latest set of objectives, it most likely is a question they are not grading. CompTIA, for some reason, does this on their exams. I don't personally think it's great. I don't think it's a good idea. I think that if you're someone who is kind of focusing on what's good and what's bad about the exam, you're kind of focusing on topic. When one of these weird one comes up, you'll know that, okay, that's the question they put in here that I'm not going to know the answer to or shouldn't know the answer to. I might know the answer to it, but it's probably not going to be graded anyway. You might get one of those on your exam, which is why I still tell people, if you know every topic on the exam objectives, you are going to pass your exam. You cannot help but pass your exam, even if they happen to ask you a question you don't know. Okay, you missed one. Think of it that way. The more you know about those objectives, the better you're going to be, for sure. So let's go over doing this. Let's do a follow-up to a question we asked earlier. This follow-up is from Cameron, who asks, during the first part of the live, we went over a Windows app on a Mac via virtualization. It was Mac OS via virtualization. Although this is iOS, you meant Mac OS, which is fine. Will Windows or Mac OS be better as a host for virtualization when using different operating systems? This is a fine question. And it's one you kind of have to think about. And it's one that has a little bit of nuance associated with it these days. So one thing that's very easy to do in Windows, most of us are running a Windows platform, you can load up a host-based virtualization software. You can load up VirtualBox. You can load up VMware has a desktop virtualization for Windows. It's free. There's other VM type hypervisors that you can load in your Windows platform. And inside of that VM, you can load up other Windows virtual machines. You can load up Linux virtual machines. What you cannot do, as per the Apple end user license agreement, is you cannot run an Apple virtual machine, a macOS virtual machine, on hardware that is not Apple's hardware. So if you're running Windows on non-Apple hardware, you cannot run an Apple VM, a macOS VM on that platform because you're not licensed to do that. Apple doesn't want you to do that. And indeed, the modern versions of macOS are not even running on an Intel platform any longer. They're all RISC-based. They're all the Apple silicon. So it's even more complicated that even if you wanted to try to violate the end-user license agreement, even then it's not going to work very well. It tends to be a lot easier to go the other direction. If you're on Mac OS, obviously you're running Mac OS already. You can run a virtualized Mac OS on that if you wanted to. But then you can also run Windows on that, and then you can also run Linux on that. That's one of those that works fine. So it's almost easier to start from a Mac OS perspective. Now, if you don't need Mac OS, if nothing you're doing in your world has anything to do with Mac OS, then you could pretty much run any operating system you'd like. You could run Linux and then run Windows on top of it. You can run Linux and run, obviously, Linux VMs on top of that. No problem. But Mac OS tends to be a good place to start. You'll notice that a lot of security professionals, security administrators, firewall administrators, security people love Mac OS. They walk around with Mac OS right next to them because they're able to run a lot of Linux and Mac OS binaries in that platform that you can't get on Windows. But then they could also run a Windows VM right on top of it as well. And now you're running and a Linux VM on top of that. Now you got everything. The best of all worlds is right there on that Mac OS desktop. That's one thing that we do here. My daily driver, my primary operating system that we have here in the studio is Mac OS. So the screens that I'm running here are Mac OS, really 3, are Mac OS screens. iOS, or really iPad OS, is here. Mac OS on a laptop is here. And there are specialized operating systems running the systems over here, which I think are Linux-based. This is embedded Linux, I think, for all of my video production stuff. So there's a good example of, because I'm running Mac OS as my daily driver, I can run any operating system I want. So if you watch my video from A+ on Active Directory, that's all a virtualized environment. I'm really running it on Mac OS. I have a Windows server running in one VM. I have a Windows workstation, Windows 11, running in another VM, and I'm connecting them all together using VMs. To you, it looks like full screen Windows. It's like I'm running on a Windows platform. That's the idea. That's the beauty of that, of running those virtual machines. And if you're in a place where you're trying to quickly build like a lab, build up Windows, build up Linux, have Windows and Linux talk to each other, there's a great one to work through. So if you're somebody who's trying to figure out, how can I get all of these to work with each other, to build them quickly, to bring this lab together and start transferring data between these systems, that's a great way to do it. If you don't have a virtualization software on your computer, you should absolutely do that today. You should download VirtualBox, should download VMware's virtualization platform. It's got different names depending on whether you're on Windows or Mac OS. There's other virtualization software out there, commercial platforms that you can get. These are all very good hypervisors. So find one that works for you. VirtualBox is free. You can download it, load it on your machine, get up and running in a matter of minutes, and then download Linux and install a new Linux VM. And now you're running a new Linux system in just a couple of minutes. You've now got Linux running on your system, on your Windows desktop. It's simple and it's easy and it works so well. And if there's ever a time where you needed multiple operating systems, you need to study for your Core 2 exam, you just want to run Windows and Linux and transfer some files with each other, maybe learn a little bit more about the Linux world and the weird terms that they use and try to figure out how it all works together, what could be easier? And you can run that in a virtual machine and not have to worry about breaking your Windows platform. Windows will break it on its own just fine. We don't need to help it along. We'll run Linux in a VM, and that way we can make changes. We can modify the partitions. We can change the boot configurations. We can modify all of those settings, and we know that none of it is going to affect our Windows platform. It works out perfect. There are challenges in getting the right virtual machine software running on the right platform with the right distribution. So you need to become very familiar, and the Core 1 exam talks about these things. You need to understand what type of platform you're currently running. Is it an Intel-based platform? Is it a 64-bit Intel processor that's in your computer? Are you running Mac OS with the Mac OS Silicon? Or do you have an older Mac OS computer and it's running Mac OS on an Intel platform? See, all of these are different, and all of these will require a different guest, a different virtual machine platform to run, because if you try to run an Intel-based VM on a Mac Silicon machine, it won't work. The virtualization isn't going to operate. You have to run a RISC-based version of that virtual machine if you're running Mac OS on Apple Silicon. So that's one of the challenges that I have had, is that, for example, if you're running in Mac OS, here's a disadvantage for running Mac OS. If you're running Mac OS, there is no RISC-based Windows Server distribution. So if you're running Mac OS, you can't create a Windows Server VM. I can create Windows 11 because there is a RISC-based version of Windows 11 that I can install, but there is not a Windows Server version that I can install. So these are the challenges you have. So you have to really work with the different processor that you're running, the VM capabilities that are in your hypervisor, and the type of software that you're planning to run as a guest, because all of those have to be compatible with each other. But once you do that very easy check, you become familiar with those terms, you become familiar with what those things are. It now becomes a lot easier to find and install the right software. And if you pick wrong, that's okay. It'll just won't work. And you're wondering, why is that not loading? Oh, I'm trying to run Intel-based VM on Mac OS running Apple Silicon. Won't work for the most part. There's some VM, I've seen some interesting VM things that are now doing more emulation that would go beyond the scope of virtualization, that are effectively converting from the Intel platform into a RISC-based platform. That becomes complicated and in many cases doesn't work that great, which is why you don't see a lot of that. So that's your challenge with virtual machines. But if you're running on Windows and you're running an Intel 64-bit platform, load up VirtualBox, load up an Intel 64-bit Linux virtual machine, and you're running. You're making it happen. It's a great way to go through the process of that. So you've got options there. Most of them are virtualization. I know there are some platforms out there that work pretty good at emulating a different type of hardware platform. They're okay. That's not a 100%. I think for those of us that are just getting started and just trying to do virtualization, don't worry so much about the emulation side. Focus on virtualization. Make sure all your processors and your software you're loading on those processors match, and you've got no problem. You could get Linux running on your platform today, be able to run Linux and say you're now familiar not only with Windows, but now you're running a Linux platform, and off you go. Might be very useful to have that there. Something that might work very well for you. And of course, you still have the cloud. Some people like to simply build out a cloud-based system. For example, you have folks like Amazon, where you can spin up a new Windows platform, or spin up a Linux platform, or spin up a Mac OS platform on the cloud, on the Amazon cloud. It's a very, very easy way to get up and running. And the only challenge there is there may be a cost associated with it. And even worse, if you leave it running or even leave the system powered down, you might still have to pay for it on a minute-by-minute basis or an hourly basis. Just be very careful if you're doing anything in the cloud that you take into account the cost can bite you pretty quick. You forget that it's in the cloud, then you end up getting a bill for $500, and you're not, for a month, I didn't even touch this machine. It hasn't even been powered on. Yeah, but it's been there, and they've been taking care of it, and now you got to pay for it. This is one of those challenges. But I think that's a great place to go too if you really want to make that happen. You can do a lot in the cloud. It's just there's usually a cost associated with it. You'll also find a lot of places that will do more of a seamless front end for you. There's places where you can pay for running a Mac OS system and you can pay by the day, that type of thing. That might be worth your time and effort. I don't know. For the purposes of the A+, I think everything you need to know about Mac OS is in my videos. It's in the exam objectives. You don't have to do a lot of hands-on with Mac OS for the A+ certification. Really none. You don't have to do any hands-on with Mac OS for the A+ certification. You do have to know Windows. You do have to know Linux. There's plenty of command line stuff for Windows and plenty of command line stuff for Linux, not to mention using Windows from the graphical front end. So just keep those things in mind. There's plenty of options out there, whether it's local virtualization you can do in the cloud, or maybe you're just bringing up a full-blown host at a hosting provider. Just depends on how much money you want to spend and the capabilities that you might have available for your machine or for your network connection. You'll be able to figure that out. Well, I think that brings us to the end of another study group. I kind of went over time a little bit. I hope that's okay. But I think that's gotten through a lot of great questions. Your questions this month were phenomenal. Thank you for sending them in. Don't forget that this was our Core 1 study group. We have a Core 2 study group that happens 2 days from now as we sit here live. This is a Tuesday. On Thursday, we will do our Core 2 study group. All new questions, all new after show. Everything is new every month. So that's a great way to come back and see how much you know about the Core 2 topics. See how much you really know about Core 1 and Core 2. And of course, we got our Network Plus and Security Plus study groups also this month. If you ever want to know when our live events are going to be, we'd love to have you join us. Simply check the calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for being here. We could not do this without you. And thanks for your ongoing support for what we do on the internet, our training courses, and our website. It really does mean a lot. Thank you. Appreciate you joining us. We'll see you next time on the A+ study group. Thanks, everybody.